Zambia's new president, Hakainde Hichilema, has started making changes, and this barely a week into the new job. Hichilema has appointed economist Dr Situmbeko Musokotwane as finance minister, which has reportedly already triggered a positive response from some in the economic circles. Now, the new president has also announced that he will promptly conclude a financing deal with the International Monetary Fund, as well as work on attracting foreign investment into the country. Hichilema, who recently defeated former President Jonathan Lungu in a recent poll by a landslide of almost 1 million votes, also made a few drastic political changes. And Vice President of Kitwe District Chamber of Commerce and Corporate Governance practitioner Emmanuel Mbambiko joins us now virtually from Zambia to talk about these new developments. Emmanuel, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be invited on your platform this morning.
So let's just start with the sentiment in the country. We saw after the election results were announced and also during the inauguration of President Hichilema that there seems to be real goodwill and very positive signs on the ground from ordinary Zambians. Is that a correct characterization of how things are going?
Yes, I think we have been quite very excited with the new government. There's a sense of feeling kind of liberated after some, being suppressed for a little while in the last 10 years. But now people feel fairly liberated, and there's life infused into the nation as it is for us.
And let's talk a bit about that, because quite a few significant changes already, especially on the economic and political front. And these, of course, were to be expected, but some would say it didn't take long for the new president to hit the ground running. So with regard to some of the economic changes, let's talk to those and how they've been received thus far.
Very expectant. And when we got the result, we saw the current president win the result. Like I said much earlier on, we felt a huge sense of relief because some of the things that he did speak about during the campaign, some of the things that he has held on to for a long time during his tenure in opposition, which are inscribed in the manifesto, and again observing how he himself has conducted himself as a business person for a period that is lived much of his life. As we look at all these factors, as we look at all these things, we were all very anticipative. And obviously, when he won the elections, he did not shy away from having to repeat exactly the same kind of things that he had been talking about, which has brought quite a lot of excitement, a sense of new energy, and some kind of renewed zeal and hope, not only in the citizenry, but this is, cross-cutting. And particularly for us in business, we feel a huge sense of relief as a result of his coming into power. Now, obviously, like I've said earlier on, this man is a businessman. He's run his businesses and successfully run his businesses. So there's a story that you can tell with regard to how he's managed his affairs. He's fairly disciplined, and he's appointing Dr. Musokotwane as finance minister, a man also who's been a civil servant with a huge amount of experience. He's been a minister before, but he's also been involved in government before with a credible, as it were, testimony behind him. It gives us quite a lot of hope. In fact, what gives us even much more hope as business people is because of the consistency in the promises and commitments that they have made. Hitherto, we're exposed to the government for the past 10 years that we are very, very inconsistent in terms of their policies. The mining sector suffered immensely because, they kept moving from one policy to the other, and you could not count. You could not keep the trace on the numbers of policies that they changed. And in the sense, business became so unpredictable because of the changes in the policies. You felt a sense of insecurity if you're running your own businesses. In fact, the whole area of running business, as it were, seems to have shrunk. And it appeared only a few were privileged to run businesses, and those few were connected to government. But this new government, which has now come, has opened up the whole space, given almost every Zambian, every entrepreneur, anyone who wants to flourish. Now, we've been given the right to, go out there and our money, do our business. And they have promised consistent policies. We are also looking forward to their commitment in terms of to spend money. The previous government were the only major borrowers, as it were, from the banks. So the banks became quite lazy. They could not look anywhere else. They could not business. All the kind of monies that they had, therefore, as business people, you are left quite without any resource if you wanted to invest into business. And, because the government was a major borrower at a high cost, it made running business also almost impossible to do, because if you had to borrow money from the bank, it came at a huge cost. The new government has promised some serious restrictive reforms, and in their fiscal policies, they have promised to be very disciplined in terms of how they spend their money, and also improve all the loopholes to do with the revenue collection. So, in the sense, what that has done for us business is it has given us a hope that now the window is opened. The banks now will no longer just have to be looking to the government for financing. Now the banks will have to work and get into the market and lend money to us business. Now the cost of the money will no longer, this huge borrower who could borrow at a huge cost. Now, the cost of money has to be lowered, because now there will be the whole concept of demand and supply between the business people and the banks. So now that brings in some new fresh air of excitement as business people, because then that if you've got ambitions for business, that at least there's some resource on which you can fall, and this resource you can participate in the cost. This resource is also readily available. So that brings quite a new flare of hope as business. All excited.
Emmanuel, if I may just interject, Emmanuel. If I may, please, what we'll do is we'll try and get you on a telephone line because the connection not great there to Emmanuel in Zambia. And he, of course, is the Vice President of the Kitwe District Chamber of Commerce, Emmanuel Mbambiko, talking to us about some of the expectations there, given the new president and some of his appointments and the policy reforms that business has reacted very positively to it. So we'll get back to Emmanuel shortly, talking about the cost of borrowing and also how things have changed in very real terms in Zambia. But of course, we'll touch on that a little bit more, because if you take a look at Bloomberg, for example, they're talking about an annual inflation in Zambia reaching 25% in July, which is the highest level in nearly 2 decades. What does that mean for ordinary Zambians as this particular government comes comes into place. Business is happy, but how does that translate to those on the ground? Because very often these are the questions that people ask, and this is why people, actually sometimes are distrustful. But in terms of the borrowing, there will also be borrowing from the IMF, Leanne, as we have heard there from Zambia. So I'm interested to know as well how Emmanuel feels about that, what businesses' idea is about that, because we know when it comes to borrowing from Bretton Woods institutions, those usually come with very stringent conditions that are often seen as being detrimental to the progress for many poor and middle-income countries.
Yeah, it certainly is. But I do know that there was, and is a lot of optimism from Zambians that there's going to be some change. I know I've got some Zambian friends, a group of friends that are living here, and I got a WhatsApp from them saying, listen, where's my congratulations? You haven't congratulated me yet on our new president. So there seems to be this optimism. But I believe we've got Emmanuel back to continue this conversation.
We've got him on a telephone line. Just hopefully that connection will be better as we speak to him about the new changes in Zambia after the poll that saw a new president inaugurated in Hakainde Hichilema. Emmanuel, thanks for getting back to us. Now, I wanted to talk to you about the actual issue of borrowing. We spoke about, you mentioned the banks and how that situation is likely to change. But we do know that Zambia will also be getting another loan from the International Monetary Fund. And what is businesses' view? What is your perception on that particular matter, given where the country is in terms of its economic outlook at the moment? You've got inflation sitting at around 25%. How is this likely to impact on the man on the street?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. From the time that the new president came into office, his coming into office, you can feel the presence of his coming into office in the economy right now. Apart from feeling it on the street in terms of, people's relief and a sense of expectation and the rejuvenated or renewed hope in people's faces. Apart from that, what has happened is, surprise, the cost of goods have started coming down. Obviously, the exchange rate, the kwacha, which was some terrible currency, suddenly it has become very, very attractive. We were in the defaulting state. I mean, we were defaulted as a country on our loans, and our treasury bills or our debt that we contracted, became junk in the eyes of the world. But suddenly, those bonds have become so attractive, and people are killing themselves over the bonds. So suddenly, the country has had life. I mean, it's like you've had the first rainfall when you have had a dry spell for a long time, and suddenly the rainfall and, things begin to sprout, and you see the birds and you see the butterflies. This is basically what has happened to the country. So we are expecting the inflation to drop. In fact, there is already some drop. In the last 1 week that the new president has been in office, already the inflation has begun to come down. And we anticipate, we are very, very anticipating. The cost of goods in the shops now, I mean, the major ShopRite Checkers, which you have in South Africa, suddenly, the cost of goods have also kind of come down. And this is just within a week. So you can imagine if you extrapolated that, we are extremely very anticipative. So we are hoping that the cost of food will also come down. The cost of fuel will also come down. And obviously, we are also anticipating that interest rates will come down.
Now, but Emmanuel, I have to ask you, what would you attribute that to? Because in a week, as you say, you've already noted all of these factors and prices coming down. What exactly is that attributable to?
By and large, I think much of it has to do with the exchange rate. The kwacha has picked up the strength. So whereas, by July, the kwacha was trading at about 23 kwacha per dollar, Now it's in the range of 15, 16 kwacha. And that's how the kwacha has strengthened. And now that impacts quite directly on a number of goods that are imported. But besides that exchange rate, what has also happened is the agriculture now, the harvest is just being done, maize is just being bought, and surprise, the price of meal meal, which is a major staple food, our most treasured food is the meal meal. The cost has come down. We are buying a bag of meal meal at around 150. Suddenly, now it is trending below 100 kwacha. And much of it, I think, has had to do with the confidence that we now have in the new government. The confidence was completely eroded. It was rock bottom. But now suddenly the confidence has come back into the economy. And all of us as businessmen who are kind of sitting on the fence and ensured that our resources were secured. Now, all of a sudden, we're saying to ourselves, what can I invest?
Speaking
so that's how
of,
exciting it is. Yeah.
Speaking of, the country's economy obviously has taken quite a beating over a number of years now. We look at the production of copper, which is estimated to account for more than 70% of export earnings for Zambia, and that has reportedly stagnated as the government clashed with mining companies, as you mentioned. But what's your view on the privatization of Zambian copper mines?
In fact, when that happened, as a chamber, we expressed our displeasure because KCM was our member, and the manner in which the government took over KCM was not a manner that we supported. And besides KCM, there is another company, CEC, which is an electricity distributing company. The government also were kind of interfering with it. And in their minds, they were hoping that they would become popular, to the miners, which we didn't support as business people because, as business people, we knew that once the government now begins to interfere with business, then it takes away your security, to run business. And that's not good at all. Now, because of that, we saw also, notwithstanding the good price of copper right now, and the copper price now is right, on top. The mining houses could not produce as much. One would have hoped that with the copper price going rocket high, you'd see the mining houses really scrounge and kill themselves over the prices, but they didn't. But it's a new change of government. Suddenly, even the mining houses have pledged. Suddenly, they have pledged investment into the mining houses. Two of the mines have pledged about $2.5 billion to invest into the mining houses. The government, with the Minister of Finance, the new Minister of Finance, made an announcement that the new government wants to see production of copper increase from about 800, which it is currently, to about 3 million. That means, therefore, that the government will have to throw in policy that encourages the production, of copper to those levels. Policies that are attractive, policies that are consistent. So we are looking forward because now copper is the new oil in the world.
Interesting. Emmanuel. We unfortunately have to leave it there because we're out of time, but great to hear the positive sentiment and, of course, the expectation. Zambia is an expectant nation at this point, very positively so at the moment, but of course we'll continue talking about it. Vice President of Kitwe District Chamber of Commerce and Corporate Governance Practitioner Emmanuel Mbambiko sharing his expectations on Zambia's economic and political trajectory as the country ushers in new administration under Zambia's new president, Hakainde Hichilema.